This is lecture number 2 in Unit 1 of Business Ethics at Newberry College, Fall 2021. In our first video, we looked at the Wells Fargo case and the effects of an ethical lapse on participants at a variety of levels. Who was helped and who was harmed? Was it fair? We looked at 3 levels at which ethical decisions are made in business: the individual level, the organizational level, and the societal political level. We looked at business ethics as an academic discipline, and finally, we began to explain why ethics is important in the business environment. On page 11 of your text, the authors present some material about psychological egoism, a theory of human behavior that asserts that humans are fundamentally and unavoidably motivated by self-interest. Are people naturally selfish? This is a theory that underlies our entire economic system of capitalism, the writings of Adam Smith about the wealth of nations, and the invisible hand of traditional economic theory. If people don't try to maximize their economic benefit, then how would supply and demand work? What would be the motivation to maximize profits? And how could we create economic growth? Psychological egoism explains acts of charity and altruism as essentially a form of virtue signaling. We'll look at this in more detail later. The idea that individuals and companies practice their charity in public in order to be seen doing so. I can think of a few critiques of their practice that go back to millennial, but it seems to be an accurate description of some human behavior. The authors present critiques of this theory, some from the writings of Thomas Hobbes and Adam Smith themselves, who acknowledge the benefits of cooperative social behavior and the benefits of ethics and social constraints. They see this as a rejection of the separation theory. I'm not entirely convinced of that, but toward the bottom of the first column on page 11, in the reality checkbox in your book, the authors make a point, one of the most valuable, I believe, in the entire chapter. They believe the acknowledgement of Hobbes and Smith of these social constraints may well be the point of ethics. People tend to act selfishly. Therefore, ethics exists to establish constraints upon this selfish behavior. In my book, I thought that was so important I highlighted it. You might want to resell yours, but in which case, I'd recommend copying that statement into your notes. The authors go on to give examples of parents and friends as exceptions to psychological egoism. They regularly, these are people who regularly put your well-being above their own. What's the author's name for that? What's the author's name? They call it societal constraints. I call it unconditional love. That's the name in my book. It's the way you treat your children if you're any kind of a decent parent. That's my value judgment, not your author's, and it doesn't need to be yours. Of course, most of us can probably think of examples of parents, other relatives, maybe your brothers and sisters, maybe friends, maybe even spouses or significant others who always seem to be keeping score. It's like having someone who's always seems to be doing math in their heads. It's that special branch of calculus in which they are nice to you as long as they seem to be getting more from you than you're getting from them. It could be the parent who withholds love if you don't get straight A's or if you're not skinny. It can be the family member, who comes to the 4th of July picnic or Thanksgiving dinner and tries to hit you up for an investment in their latest scheme, or the friend who invites you to lunch or dinner and tries to sign you up for some sort of a pyramid distribution scheme. These social calculus practitioners can be one of the most annoying in any family or group of friends. Picture Rachel McAdams' character in Mean Girls, or Tia Leone's character, the rich mother in Spanglish, or Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. They are often the self-appointed bosses of whatever group they're in. So I'm still in the reality check box on page 11 of your textbook. Are human beings naturally selfish? Isn't it part of human nature to look after your own needs first? Doesn't that provide a platform for helping others? If you have unmet needs, can you really address other people's needs? Even on an airplane, the flight attendant always reminds you that when turbulence hits and the plane nosedives and the oxygen masks drop, to put your own mask on first before helping others, right? So how does ethics fit into all of this? Are we unethical if we place our own needs first? If we try to win? How does our propensity for selfishness fit in with our standards of ethical behavior? Let's look at an example. Consider primitive people, caveman days. Suppose I was a good deer hunter and you were a good potato farmer. You were sick of potatoes and would love a side of meat. Well, I'm going insane on the paleo diet and would love a couple of potatoes to go with all that venison. We can trade and we can take advantage of other skills and resources. You have lots of potatoes and don't value them that highly. I'm tired of salting down meat, would probably give it away to keep the flies down at the cave. We can trade. We can make an exchange and each take advantage of our talents to benefit ourselves and others. That sort of exchange is the basis of all market economies. Add a currency to facilitate more complicated transactions, and you have the basis for banking and merchants. And the rest is history, so to say. What if I were that great deer hunter and I said, my venison is the best venison, and I'm not going to give it or trade it away to anybody? Wouldn't that be selfish? Would it help me? No, because I won't get any potatoes to add to my meal. And it wouldn't help anyone else who could trade his surplus goods and services to get my fine venison. It would harm society. What if, say, I'll only trade a pound of venison for 100 potatoes, and you, remember, you're the potato farmer, you only have 50 potatoes, and frankly, you worked hard for them and would like to keep 40 for yourself. So you only want to trade 10 of your potatoes. You want to keep the rest for yourself and your family. Well, maybe we won't be able to make a trade. But maybe there's a deer hunter in the next cave who's willing to take your 10 potatoes for a pound of his venison. I'm out of luck. I set my price too high, and the other hunter cavemen will get your potatoes. Is that ethically wrong? No, that's perfectly appropriate. The market mechanism worked. This is what Adam Smith and the other separation theorists are referring to with respect to the invisible hand. The market price was set at 10 potatoes for a pound of venison. The other hunter and the farmer who made the trade at that price. I still have my fine venison and my pride, but no potatoes. Is that fair or unfair? I think you know my thoughts on that. Sometimes as I read the author's writings, though, I think that maybe I'm in the minority on this subject. Suppose I'm an angry deer hunter, and I'm very disappointed that I didn't make the deal for the potatoes. However, I know that you go out and work your field every morning at 6 a.m. Farmers get up earlier than college students or professors, and don't come back to your cave for lunch until noon. So at 7 a.m. the next day, I come over to your cave and take 10 potatoes. What? You can't do that. That's stealing, you say. Well, what if you don't notice the potatoes are missing? I'm a quiet and careful hunter, and maybe I can elude detection just as I did when I was stalking the deer. What if you don't notice that the potatoes are gone? It's still stealing, you say. Okay, suppose you notice that the potatoes are gone, but in the meantime, I've eaten the evidence and you can't prove I've stolen them, even though I just traded some venison with the milkmaid in the valley for some butter and some sour cream. You can't prove I did it. It's still stealing. It's wrong, you persist. Okay, suppose you contact the tribal elders and bring in the milkmaid, and she tells them that when I was trading for the butter and sour cream, I was bragging about the 10 wonderful potatoes I had just gotten to eat. And the elders see me and see that I'm now fat and full of potatoes, and they punish me for taking your potatoes. Is that ethical? It's justice, you say. I got what I deserve. That's ethical, you say. You say that I did something wrong and I was punished for it. Okay, suppose I go about this differently. Suppose instead of sneaking in and taking the potatoes, let's suppose I take the 3 hunters who live near me over to your cave, the potato farmer's cave, that is, and we hold a vote and on the rules for potato distribution on our hillside. And we vote 4-1 that all potatoes will be shared equally among the 5 of us who have the caves on the hillside. So I get 10 potatoes. The other 3 hunters each get 10 potatoes. That's 30 more. And you, the potato farmer, are left with 10 potatoes. What about that? Have I solved the problem of fairness and legality? Is that ethical? No, you say. That's not fair, and that's not legal, and that's not ethical. Why not? I answer. We all ended up with the same amount of potatoes. That's fair, isn't it? Equality is fairness, right? It's legal. We voted on it. Voting is democratic. Are you anti-democratic? You lost 4-1. So it's fair and it's legal. It's ethical, right? No, it's not fair and it's not legal, you insist. Even the government can't just take my property without due process and just compensation. That's a constitutional right. Even if there's a vote by a majority, each individual still has basic rights. And if you violate those rights, it's unethical. Well, clearly you're an American, aren't you? That's just compensation theory may be a right in the USA, but not in our caveman society. And that's a point that's also made by your textbook's authors, that notions of what is right and wrong, what is ethical, are based on societal norms and will be different in different societies. American standards of what is right and wrong will be very different from what you find in Cuba or China or throughout the Middle East. And that's the second lecture for unit number 1. We will have a third one to come in just a little while. But in the meantime, keep up with your reading, and we'll talk with you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.